Square Enix announced before releasing Dissidia NT that they would be putting DLC characters into the game. So even though you've bought the game and also paid for the online subscription, you can still spend a bit more money to get characters you love. So as I'm a huge fan of the characters and lore of each Final Fantasy game, I think it's a really important part of the games. I'm going to suggest 5 characters that I think should be in Dissidia NT. The first brilliant character I'm going to suggest Square Enix put in Dissidia NT is from a game that possibly has one of the best stories of any Final Fantasy. It's Vayne Crudus Solidar. Now, Vayne Crudus Solidar, he has very clear motives in Final Fantasy XII. He wants to become the Dynast King, which basically means he has an army, which are some of the guys that you might fight in Final Fantasy XII. Kind of felt like he had the only army and there wasn't really anyone, trying to fight him or anything. But anyway, he's known as a great politician, and it shows in the game because in the 2 scenes where he's actually in the game, he says things like, "I will become the Dynast King. Ivalice will know a new Dynast King, and man will keep his own history. The tyranny of the gods is ended. We are their puppets no more. The freedom for which we have longed is at hand." So Vayne basically said this because number one, he's cool as hell and he says cool things all the time, but also it shows how deep the political lore of this game is, because basically he's saying that gods ruled over Ivalice before because they had a Princess Ash, and he's just come in with his army and been like, "No, you're not princess anymore. I'm like a king now, so I'm gonna be the Dynast King." In terms of how he will be implemented into Dissidia, I see him as this kind of guy who is able to meld metal into himself. So any character that has metal on their outfits or anything like that, he would probably do double damage to, because he'd just be he'd suck up all Squall's belts. Squall's belts would just come flying off of him. And then his pants would fall down and he'd be able to easily just defeat him. Plus, because he's such a good character with a political mind, he would easily be able to convince the other characters not to fight, because he's so charismatic and such a memorable character. Oh, sorry guys. I've just realised that Vayne Crudus Solidar is actually coming to Dissidia NT. So Square Enix must have, been on the ball with that one. So we'll take this as a bonus character and we'll do 5 more after this. So here's the next character. So this is actually going to be in order of how deep, complex and well written these characters are. So next up is Padre Ballas Caius. Padre Ballad Caius. Because he's such a memorable character. Final Fantasy 13-2, when you think of that game, not only do you think of pressing X for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours on end, but you think, what a great bad guy and what a great character Caius Ballad is. So Final Fantasy 13-2 starts off and you are playing as Lightning, which automatically makes it one of the best Final Fantasies. But not only that, you're fighting this awesome battle where this guy called Caius, who you've never even heard of before, just completely comes out of nowhere and is this massively important character who can control time, which makes the events of the previous game completely pointless. So it's awesome in that way, because he's such a good character that it just makes everything pointless. And you know how in a lot of stories, if there's a mentor figure, it's always this awesome guy who has lots of knowledge and know-how about things. Well, Caius Ballad is the mentor of another awesome character called Noel Kreese. And that just makes his character even more awesome, because he knows more than him and he's better at things. He also has this cool move he can do where he fuses with Bahamut, he summons Bahamut and he fuses with him and becomes one entity. But it just looks exactly the same, only it's slightly darker and therefore cooler. My favourite quote from Caius Ballad has to be, I see you understand the significance of that. Then you must also understand that I'm here for a reason. Your actions have necessitated the strictest sanctions, and that is basically telling the player, the audience of the game, that Final Fantasy 13-2 has such a complex and intricate story that is so important to the overall lore of the 13 trilogy that it's just awesome, basically. Because Caius Ballard is here for a reason. I can see Caius Ballard being perfectly implemented into Dissidia NT's gameplay because you could easily take influence from Final Fantasy 13-2, which has one of the most complex battle systems of any Final Fantasy game. Basically, rather than using all the different buttons and everything that you would expect to use in Dissidia, Caius's playstyle could involve not only if you're playing as him, you have to press X like over and over again. So any move that he does, you just have to press X, and you'd move by pressing X as well. But not only that, Caius's time-bending powers could make it so even if you're fighting against him, the only thing you could do was press X. And then depending on how well you pressed X, that would determine the outcome of the battle in Dissidia NT. The next most well-written and awesome character on the list is the unforgettable Douglas Hine from Final Fantasy The Spirits Within. Now, Douglas Hine, like most well-written characters, has one defining character trait. It's that he despises all things ghostly and spectral. He hates them so much, in fact, that he's willing to destroy possibly the last bastion of humanity just to get at a few of these spectral things flying around and killing people. So Douglas Hine possibly has the best quote of any Final Fantasy ever. Yes, even better than You Spoony Bard. And that is, "Prepare to meet your Gaia." Because the characters are all like talking shit in his ear about this Gaia stuff that's like energy flowing through the planet and the planet's life force. Only in The Spirits Within it's told a lot better than in Final Fantasy VII, which has similar themes. I see only one way that this character could work in Dissidia NT, and I think it will be a very unique playstyle for people. And that is, when you're playing as Douglas Hine, anyone on the opposite team who gets incapacitated can no longer revive and has to fight Douglas Hine. So he's like fighting the ghost of that character. And if you are a Spectre yourself and you're fighting against Douglas and lose, then that takes another hit point off of your team. Also, I think Douglas should have a special move where he just kind of sacrifices himself and his teammates to just kill everyone that's playing, and then the match just ends and it's a draw. I think that would be really fitting to the character. So we're getting serious now, and the next character that I'm going to suggest they put in Dissidia NT, it's another character from Final Fantasy 13-2 because it has so many great characters and such a deep lore, and that is Chocobocolina. Sorry, Chocobocolina, that's the name, yeah. Is it Chocobocolina or Chocobocolina? So the reason she's such a good character is because if you read an obscure passage in the in-game encyclopedia in Final Fantasy 13-2, you'll discover that Chocobocolina is actually the chocobo that lived in a black man's hair in Final Fantasy 13. I can't remember that character's name. I think he was the worst character on in Final Fantasy 13. He was just a black man, basically. I remember that much. Anyway, this chocobo lived in his hair, and then when Caius Ballard, another great character, messed up all the time and that, basically Chocobocolina turned into a human, but with like some sort of sexy BDSM outfit that was also chocobo feathers. So Chocobocolina can also travel through time and space, and she's the shopkeeper of the game, which makes her really important because basically if you ever get any treasure chests in Final Fantasy 13-2, they basically contain either potions or 100 gil. So you really need a shopkeeper, otherwise you're not going to get any items at all that you need or want. And that leads me to how she should play in Dissidia NT. So basically, Chocobocolina should have an ability that sends her back in time to an earlier point in the match, and then she can do damage to other characters at that point in time. And so, like, I have no idea how those characters would then be able to hit her, but basically, whatever damage she does is then sort of translated into the present. But then also, like, in the future, right? Like, she could. So who's a better character than Chocobocolina? Come on. Well, I'll tell you, it's Fisher Kid from Final Fantasy VIII. How amazing would it be to play as Fisher Kid in Dissidia NT? So you meet Fisher Kid on a side quest from the Master Fisherman, who you know is a good character because he has Master in his name. And then you go and meet Fisher Kid and you need to tell him how to be a good fisher. But at first he's like all crap at fishing, so he's like whipping his fishing rod around and he's knocking signs off of shops and stuff like that. But then after you talk to him for a bit, you implant your experience onto him, and then it kind of goes bub, 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 limit break, and it's like he's really good at fishing all of a sudden because he's got a limit break. Oh no, wait. That was the pilot in Final Fantasy VII, wasn't it? Not the Fisher Kid. Another great character. Anyway, the Fisher Kid, how he would play in Dissidia NT is basically whenever you're running around just doing stuff, this fishing rod will be like whipping all over the place. So it might not necessarily have any like different attacks or anything, like specific attacks, but just by you walking around, characters all over the place will be just getting hit by this fishing rod. Oh, and I've just thought of a great way that we could spend more money. What if there was unlockable weapon skin where on the end of the fishing rod it had like a shop sign, and you could charge like £5 for that, couldn't you? That'd be ace. Now the moment you've all been waiting for. The best, most well-written character in all of the Final Fantasy games, and the number one character I think you should have in Dissidia NT, and it is the man in the cave. Now, whilst playing Final Fantasy VII, you may or may not encounter a man in a cave, and he may or may not reveal the amount of times you've been in battle. And it's a cool little side quest where you can basically get Aeris's ultimate weapon at the end of it. But I'm not talking about that man in the cave. No, I'm talking about a different man in the cave, which is even better. Just as you're leaving Mount Coral for the first time after putting that drawbridge down, there's a little section off to the left, which if you don't have the icons on telling you where entrances are and stuff, you probably wouldn't even know it was there. I've played Final Fantasy VII so many times, and I've only just recently realised that this cave was even here. And to say how amazing and important this character is to Final Fantasy VII, I'm surprised that they hid it away so much. So this man is clearly living in this crap hole, and he's lying on his bulldozer, because he has no bed, so he has to lie on the seat of his bulldozer. And from what little he says, like, we can glean that he thinks that Coral is a shithole, and that's it really. There used to be more jobs around there. Now this whole area, the cave and the guy just sitting on his bulldozer, is the most fascinating aspect of Final Fantasy VII basically, and it makes the game so much better for me having recently discovered it. But let's get to how the man in the cave should play in Dissidia. I think there's only one way this can go, folks. It is that he's riding a bulldozer. So forget all your dodging mechanics, your different attacks and stuff. Basically, Dissidia would change into, your standard driving controls when playing as the man in the cave. His special attacks could raise and lower the big shovel thing on the front. I'm not sure what gameplay purpose that would serve yet, but I think it's a cool idea. So thanks very much for watching. Feel free to let us know in the comments what characters you think we should be paying for in the future DLC of Dissidia NT. I've been Jake of theretroperspective.com, and on a different note, happy April 1st.